Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Sports Report, the archived editions. I'm Dave Rush in St. David's, just north of the Great Niagara Falls, along with John Poulter in Scarborough, just outside the world-class city of Toronto. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dave. Always fun to chat with you on the archives.
And today we're looking back into NHL history, and we're going to look at the great Toronto Maple Leaf, Borje Salming. So, John, why'd you come up with Borje Salming as your topic for today?
Well, Borje Salming was a trailblazer in many ways, and we'll get to why he was a trailblazer as we go through the segment. But a very important man in terms of NHL history, being Swedish by birth. He had a great influence on the game of hockey, and of course, living in the city of Toronto, I got to see very many of his games, and he was a player that I admired very much so, both as an individual and as a hockey player.
Okay, well, we're interested in learning here. So for those, there may be many who know all about his career. Some might not know as much, but here will be a good education on it from John Poulter. So, John, go ahead on Borje Salming.
Well, he was born Anders Borje Salming in April of 1951 in a little place, about 25,000 people, called Kiruna, which is the northernmost town in Sweden. And it's about 90 miles north of the Arctic Circle, and it's 778 miles straight north of Stockholm. In other words, a 14-hour drive. So take out the map one day and look at where Stockholm is and go straight north, almost 800 miles. You find yourself in the little mining town of Kiruna, which is actually almost into Norway. So it is literally the most northern town in the country of Sweden. And, Kiruna has a short, cool summers, long, cold winters that provides its residents with a great opportunity to play hockey. And there's a lot of snow cover in Kiruna. It usually lasts from late September until early May. The sun doesn't set between late May and mid-July, which is approximately 50 days. Conversely, the sun doesn't rise from early December to early January. So you've got periods of 24 hours of darkness and 24 hours of light. You ever see yourself living in a place like that, Dave?
That does sound odd. People do. I thought living in Green Bay or close to Green Bay was north enough, but this is way north. But you're right. In the winters, it gives kids a lot of time to learn about hockey, I would imagine.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there's not too many baseball players come out of Sweden.
Or sunbathers.
Or sunbathers, exactly. Even the summers are a little cool there. So, Salming's heritage is part Swedish on his mother's side and part Lapp on his father's side. So he could claim two nationalities in reality. His paternal grandfather had the surname of Sari, and I'm not 100% sure of the pronunciation of that, not being Swedish. But he changed it to Salming when he and his father, so in other words, Borje Salming's great-grandfather, built a town that was named Salming. So therefore they changed the family name to adapt to the town. So a little bit of history there in terms of the name change. Kiruna is an iron ore community. Borje's father, Erland Salming, died in a mining accident when Borje Salming was only 5 years old. So he basically grew up in a much different household than the average individual does. And he has an older brother by the name of Stig Salming, who was also a very prominent defenseman. He played a lot for the Swedish national team. He was a very capable player, well known in Sweden, although he never did play in the NHL. So other than in international play, when we've seen him play in North America, we didn't get any exposure to Stig Salming at all. So, if we want to look at his playing career now, he played with Kiruna AIF, which was in those days was in Sweden's second division from 1967 to 1970, before joining a team called Brynäs, which is in the city of Gav in the Swedish first division. He played with Brynäs from 1970 to 1973. And if we look at a website, and this is a kind of an interesting story, it tells us a little bit about Borje Salming's dedication and his competitiveness. If you look at a website for a business that he now runs, in his rookie year with Brynäs, his teammates learned a lot about his work ethic. He basically was played a trick. They played a trick on him in his rookie year. Quite frankly, they gave him directions for a bike training session that was about 100 kilometers or 62 miles longer than the actual course, and they let him run it. And he didn't say a word. He came right back, and I guess he showed his dedication by doing it again alone and without question. So that, I think, told us a little bit about what Borje Salming was as an individual. He then was playing with Brynäs, as I mentioned, in the Swedish Elite League, and a Toronto Maple Leaf scout by the name of Gerry McNamara, who later went on to become the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. His main claim to fame, though, will always be that he went to Sweden in the early 1970s to watch Brynäs play, to actually watch a player by the name of Inge Hammerstrom, who was a left winger on the Brynäs team, and a player that everybody in the NHL thought had a bit of a future in the NHL. But when McNamara went to see Hammerstrom play, he came away even more impressed with Salming than he was with Hammerstrom. So he basically signed both of them. Interesting way to get an NHL All-Star.
Kind of a fluke way.
Well, in a lot of ways.
You hear about that a lot. I think that's how, a lot of players get discovered, is scouts are looking at others.
Yeah. I mean, and we talk about Salming and his success. He was nicknamed the King. And when you look at his success, you can obviously see why. Just quickly looking at some of his achievements. He holds numerous single season and career records for the Toronto Maple Leafs, including things like most points by a defenseman, most career goals by a defenseman, most career assists by any Toronto Maple Leaf. He has the second best plus minus in Maple Leaf history with 150, second only to the great Tim Horton, who had 151. And what we have to keep in mind here is that Horton played most of his good hockey on those excellent Toronto Maple Leaf teams of the 1960s, which won 4 Stanley Cups. Salming played most of his good hockey on those terrible Maple Leaf teams of the early 70s and the mid 70s. So I think it's a great achievement to Salming as an individual. If you look strictly at an individual stat, when you compare the eras in which these two gentlemen played. He was an NHL first team All-Star once. He was an NHL second team All-Star 5 times. He was awarded the Viking Award, which is given to the best Swedish hockey player in North America 3 times. He was the winner of the Molson Cup 4 times, and the Molson Cup is the trophy that's given by the Toronto Maple Leafs to the player on the Maple Leafs who has been voted one of the 3 stars the most times in any one season. He was named to the Canada Cup All-Star team in 1976. For those that do not know what the Canada Cup is, it's the equivalent of soccer's World Cup. He was awarded the Charlie Conacher Humanitarian Award in 1982, which is an award given to the NHL player who, quote, makes outstanding contribution to humanitarian or community service projects. Now, that award is not associated or affiliated with the NHL, but I think the fact that he was awarded the honor says something about Borje Salming as an individual. He played for Team NHL in the 1979 Challenge Cup, which was a series between the NHL and the then called Soviet Union. He was elected to the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1996, named to the International Hockey Hall of Fame in 1998, and had his sweater number 21 retired permanently by the Toronto Maple Leafs in 2016. So going back now to when McNamara brought him back from Sweden, as I say, Salming impressed McNamara just as much, perhaps more, than Hammerstrom did. So he signed the both of them, and both players joined the Leafs in the fall of 1973. Hammerstrom had a brief, but quite frankly, a very uneventful NHL career, while Salming went on to be one of the elite defensemen of his era. We talked about the number of All-Star nominations and awards that Salming won. And I think something that's very key here is the fact that he played in an era when there were some other outstanding defensemen in hockey. And, just very quickly thinking of names like Bobby Orr, Brad Park, Denis Potvin, Serge Savard, Guy Lapointe, Larry Robinson, all great hockey players, played on much better teams than Borje Salming did. And all except Park won at least 1 Stanley Cup. So I think in a lot of respects, this explains the lack of first team All-Star selections. He was just unlucky at the time that he played. He made his mark in his very first NHL game against the Buffalo Sabres. Played extremely well. I remember watching the game. I believe the score was 7-4, but don't quote me on that. He played so well, he was voted the first star of the game. A few days later, the Leafs went into Philadelphia, and at that time, the Philadelphia Flyers were just starting their era of the Broad Street Bullies, and they were basically trying to run teams and players right out of their rink. Salming, being a Swede, was one of the guys they picked on. They tried to intimidate him immensely, but he stood up to them, didn't back down at all, gave them pound for pound, inch for inch, and gained a tremendous amount of respect from his teammates and a lot of others throughout the National Hockey League. He was an interesting character too, because while he wasn't the first European to play in the NHL, he was the first superstar to be from Europe to play in the NHL. And that eventually paved the way for countless other Swedes, Finns, Russians, Czechs, Slovaks, and other numerous European countries and players to play in the NHL. So I think from that standpoint, Dave, we can say that he was very much an individual that had a mark on the NHL. He played 1,099 regular season games for the Toronto Maple Leafs, which is third all time between George Armstrong and Tim Horton. He also played 81 playoff games for the Leafs, and in total scored 160 goals and contributed 657 assists for 817 points while in a Toronto uniform. Unfortunately, in September 1986, while he was with the Leafs, the NHL suspended Salming for the entire 1986-87 season as a result of his admitting in a magazine article that he had tried cocaine. And that's probably something a lot of people do not realize. The NHL lifted the suspension after just 8 games. Quite frankly, it's so many years ago, I don't remember the rationale for that. Perhaps they rethought their position and gathered that it was a bit of a misdemeanor, but not a major situation. So they felt that 8 games, the lesson had been learned. That incident remains really the only stain on an otherwise excellent reputation. Upon becoming a free agent after the 88-89 season, he signed a 1-year contract with the Detroit Red Wings. Unfortunately, that did not work out all that well. He wasn't the hockey player that he had been at that point. He only played 49 games for the Red Wings, and I think he had 2 goals and 17 assists in that one season with the Red Wings. He then returned to Sweden, where he played 3 seasons with a team known as AIK, which is a team based in Stockholm, a little bit closer to home rather than Kiruna, and AIK, of course, in the Swedish Elite League. Since his retirement, he hasn't really been in the hockey scene very much. He does make the occasional trip to North America to play in old timers games and visit the Hall of Fame at the annual induction ceremonies. After he finished playing, he remained in Sweden. He started a men's underwear business known as Salming Underwear, and that appears to have been very successful. And that is the website where I did find the story about him with the biking trip. So that's an interesting website in terms of the history of Salming and the history of his company, if anybody is interested in seeking it out. I think Salming probably has a legacy like very few others do from Europe as far as NHL hockey players are concerned. Not only did he become the first European superstar in the NHL, he paved the way for countless others, as we have mentioned, but he was the first Swedish hockey player to be inducted into the NHL or the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1996. He was also ranked number 74 on the Hockey News list of top 100 NHL players, which also made him the highest ranking Swede. And perhaps the best compliment and the best way to sum up what he meant to the game of hockey came from his former clubmate, Matt Sundin, himself a Hall of Famer and a former captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs, a very well respected individual in hockey circles in North America and in Europe. I don't know when this comment was made, but the quote that I found was, and again, I'm quoting here, Sundin says, "Every Swede respects Borje and pays him tribute for what he has done. For us, Swedish hockey players, he is the man who showed us the right way. He is a trailblazer." I think it's safe to say, Dave, that Borje Salming certainly was a trailblazer.
John Poulter in Toronto. This is the Sports Archives.